Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Good to see you all here on this amazing Tuesday. Tom, how are you doing? I'm joined by Tom. As you've noticed, and Tom has a new whiskey shelf I can see.
I do, yeah. My neighbor moved to Austin. Everybody's moving to Texas these days. Oh, go Bears! Any of you folks from the Waco area, congratulations. But yeah, so I got this shelf, and now I can throw up some whiskey bottles. I mean, not quite as impressive as yours, Ben, but yeah, it's nice to have a little display to heighten, the visual. My wife says I really need to get some fake plants. I don't know. I'm not there yet.
I used to be all in the fake plants, and then I turned 21 years old. And
there you go.
I've been struggling to keep real plants alive, but I need to go back to fake plants because I just living in the city. I just have horrible natural lighting. You can probably tell here, and I should probably go back to fake plants, but I have sort of this urge.
Well, you have that lovely lamp. But anyway, enough about design. Nobody wants to hear about that.
So no, it looks good, Tom. Good to see you. Everybody,
good to see you too, man.
Throw a comment in the chat. What do you think of Tom's shelf? Scale 1 to 10. I think it looks really fancy. The wood looks good. And
the winner might get a free bottle of whiskey. I don't know. Whoever has the nicest things to say about it, I might send them something. I'm not sure.
Well, anyway, guys, welcome back to the channel. We got a pretty special lineup for you today. It is Outturn Day. It's our April Outturn release. It's dropping in less than an hour. And we do these previews oftentimes the night before. In this case, I just got the bottles we'll be tasting about 1 to 2 hours ago. So we're doing it right before the release. So if everybody's watching right now, log in to your account online and get ready. I think it's in an hour. Some of these might go pretty quick, but I think we have a pretty cool selection overall with a lot to choose from. So that's it. I mean, you haven't tasted any of these, correct, yet?
Oh, these are still unopened bottles. I figured we could pop the corks together on the stream, and everyone can envy in our discovery. What do you think?
I think that's a good plan. I mean, obviously, I haven't opened these either, and so we'll be going through these for the first time. You guys are getting an unfiltered tasting opinion to help you choose the whiskey that's sort of right for your palate. But quick shout out to Cat in the Garden for the first in the chat, who says hello all. Hello, Cat in a Garden. Sorry, Daniel Duggar, good to see you. She drinks Scotch. All right, I knew some of them too. Y'all, I can finally chat on here. Hi all. Hello, she drinks Scotch. Brian Bomstein's in the house. Todd Greenhouse, and Adam Clary, Rob Gilmore. Man, we have a lot of people in today. Matthew Taylor.
And Evan Belt out of Kentucky thinks that I look good in the aquarium. So thank you, sir. I love shared office spaces. It's what I do. I'm very comfortable. Yeah.
I think Daniel Clark says here, that shelf is the best of all shelves ever made. It makes all other shelves jealous. It makes all the society members jealous. It's truly a king of shelf among shelves. Tom, how do you feel about yourself now?
I mean, I'm on top of the world, dude. I feel really good. I'm ready to maybe taste some whiskey, get a little midday buzz on. Nothing wrong with that. What do you think? Should we pop the first one, or do you want to chat a bit more? I don't know.
Anyway,
I'm eager.
Anyway, so let's go through. We got a pretty exciting lineup today. You want to kick off the first one? So we're doing 4. We're tasting 4 today, and at the end of this session, we'll be sharing the rest of the release. It'll be dropping again at 1 p.m. Eastern time today. So get ready for that. So I guess apologies for the short notice, but we're glad to have you with us here. And here we go.
All right. So our first cask is from the Northern Highlands. Certainly a member favorite. This is cask 29 point. Excuse me. Wow. Sorry, guys. It is not a 29. It is a 26. 26.158. This is called Waxing Tropical. It's a 9-year-old out of a second fill ex-bourbon barrel. And I feel like we've been on a run of really tasty second fill ex-bourbons from all over Scotland. So, this distillery is known for its hallmark texture, fairly weighty spirit, and in this particular single cask, we're looking at a good dose of, I would presume, tropical fruits.
Yeah, it's interesting. So young 26, 9 years old, and I'm a sucker for the blue, sort of this royal blue, juicy oak and vanilla flavor profile.
Yeah.
One of our 12, and I write about that pretty much every month in our hidden gems feature. I always, when I'm going around looking for casks that really stand out to me, sort of the sleeper casks, there's always something from juicy oak and vanilla. But interestingly, usually they're a lot of first fill bourbon barrels, really fresh bourbon casks. This is a second fill, meaning that it's been used once before to mature Scotch. But still, I mean, the profile suggests that we're going to get a lot of cask influence from the bourbon wood. So, and we should also probably point out, Tom, because being the first pour of the bottle, one would call that the neck pour. Typically, we always recommend, let the whiskey breathe, especially with cask strength whiskey in a new bottle. You want to give it some time, if not 30 minutes. A few days of air in the bottle to really allow the spirit to reach its.
That whiskey's been closed up for quite some time. It's traveled oceans and it doesn't age like wine in the bottle. So really, any sort of development starts after bottling once the cork is popped, and you get some oxygen in there, and the whiskey the dram rather that you drink out of that bottle 2 weeks later is oftentimes rather different than the one that we're probably going to be tasting right now.
Yeah.
But first impressions are always fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whiskey is probably could use some time to breathe. I think our experience here is indicative of what yours will be when you order the bottle, and as long as we can all accept that it will get better with a little bit of time and a little bit of air. Still, it's a cask strength whiskey nonetheless.
Okay.
It's just like it's 11:08 my time, Central Time Zone, and this is, I think, a really perfect late morning.
Thanks for taking one for the team, man.
It's very aromatic, just really kind of a burst of fresh vanilla cream. It's a bit buttery just on the nose.
Yeah, it's pretty buttery. Yeah.
A little bit of
getting a lot of tropical fruits, some white flowers.
Yeah, it's very fresh, like very vibrant aroma.
Yeah, it has a spring, a spring-like orientation to it for sure. Which is nice. The weather's getting nicer. It's getting a little warmer. Finally in New York, the rain has stopped and the sun has come out. So it's pretty exciting.
It's pretty, for me, it's pretty delicate overall. I mean, I know this, and even for the first whiskey that I've had today.
Yeah.
I will be honest, this is the first whiskey I've had today at 11 a.m. But it is pretty delicate, I would say, on the nose.
I mean, for 59.2%, it's not very aggressive. The aromas aren't really keeping me from getting my nose in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is, delicacy would be a good word for sure. Extremely aromatic. I mean, there's a lot coming out at you.
There's a little bit of that sort of classical waxy characteristic on the aroma that I think a lot of us would look for in this Northern Highland distillery spirit.
I get that sense. I mean, I don't get like a paraffin type aroma, but I get that sense of texture if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think it's definitely it's sort of in the background. It's delicate, but I guess if I were to sum this up in one word, just nosing it, it's fresh. It's like the rolling hills of Scotland with some flowers growing from the grass. I mean, it's pretty spot on.
Well, now that you've put it in my head, like, have you ever smelled a candle that isn't scented, like before you light it, like just smelled the wax? Yeah. And now I'm starting to get some of that. I don't know if that's just the power of suggestion, but definitely a secondary or tertiary level there. It's certainly the butter and creaminess and floral. Some nice tropical fruits. I'm trying to get a beat on that.
Matthew G. Ryan says, "I like when there is a confirmed waxiness." Yeah, I'd say it's there. Again, yeah. It's subtle. I'm gonna go ahead and dive in.
Well, that's a style of this make that's typically consistent throughout every one of these casks. certainly a common link between them. All right. Have you tasted yet?
Cheers. No, I'm just
okay. Slanja.
Slanja. Still fresh to the palate. I mean, obviously, such a high strength, 59.2%. It's going to be intense. The delivery is very intense, but I think the delicate profile makes it's like surprisingly palatable for such a strong whiskey.
It's definitely got some intensity there on the entry, getting like baked goods, a little bit of nuttiness in the mid palate, like a touch of like toasted hazelnut or something. Some really nice white pepper spice on the finish.
Yeah, I think like there's a fresh oak element to it, and it's interesting because this whiskey is matured in a second fill bourbon barrel. It's not virgin oak. It's not even first fill. So the oak cask itself is not new when it was filled in. Well, it says here on the bottle, distilled September 19, 2011. So that wood that the spirit was aged in is not new, but there's still a presence. Like it is a bit oaky. It has this sort of freshly chopped, almost like a pine wood sort of element to it.
Yeah.
It's funny. You can tell this is an example. It's the first whiskey of the day, and you can tell that in an hour's time, maybe by tomorrow, or especially 3 days from now, this is probably. I feel like there's a lot more to be uncovered. You know what I mean? There's a lot in terms of layers and complexity overall. I think we're going to get a very bright and fresh sort of surface, but
I'm just going to add a few drops.
Yeah, I'm going to do the same.
A few drops of water, see what we can get. Maybe just a couple more. So as I've said before, Ben, I'm reducing until I no longer feel that prickle or that burn from the alcohol in the nose. It's typically how I add water, because I don't want to overwater it, but I do want to get a slightly different experience.
For me, just adding a few drops brought out like this baked apple pie. So it's funny, when I nosed it, I was just
oh, that's a good call. Yeah,
you called out the like this baked goods type of profile on the palate, and I wasn't really getting that at first, but I think with a little bit of water, it adds another layer, sort of warming out the overall character.
That's a really good call. Yeah, because some orchard fruit for sure. I would definitely say apples of some sort, slightly spiced.
And a question from Sunday Evening Scotch. Any notes of a confectionery shop? I get that a lot when I crack a fresh bottle from the distillery. Is that sort of like just candied sweets or sugar? I think specifically.
Well, I'm getting kind of like, do you know those candies? I think they're called cow's tails or something. They're like long.
Yeah, with like
and they have like a kind of a very fake caramel type thing with
this fake is
powdery sugar center. I'm getting the powdery sugar center, so like a confectionery sugar, a powdered sugar type aroma on the nose. Right. But there is some other sweets. There are certainly some other sweets there. Maybe a very, very light caramel.
Now, obviously, as every minute passes, this whiskey is breathing more and more for the very first time. So it's going to evolve, I think, in a positive direction every way. But I'll tell you, a few drops of water has really done this thing wonders for me.
Yeah.
So much more depth. I think it was very fresh, sort of freshly cut wood at first. We have more of the baked goods. The freshly chopped wood for me hasn't gone away, but there's just more depth and more warmth overall.
Yeah, the oak provides some nice structure without being drying. Sometimes the tannins can really dry out the palate on the mid palate, and it provides great structure to the flavors that are coming through. But man, it just like glides. It really glides across the palate. That's a very nice whiskey.
So So some questions, suggestion that will this top the March mid-month outturn? It sounds like there's some fans in the chat here watching today. And Robert Anderson adds, mid-March had a nice outturn plus the bonus of the tar pit hitting our emails. Yeah, what do you guys think of tar pit? I'm curious if anyone's for those of you watching, we ordered a bottle of the latest blend, the tar pit.
I think there are some fun things coming out.
Yeah. Well, I think this is.
And tar pit, I did not get a chance to enjoy that whiskey. It's vanished. But I don't know. Did you, Ben? Did you get a taste?
And listen, guys, this is the whole thing. You would think here, Tom and I today are having a chance to sort of sit through these whiskeys, but most of the time we are behind our screens doing our job, making sure you get the whiskey. And
yeah, it's difficult, you know. I still feel guilty about 29273. You know, I tasted that bottle; it's up above me, and you know, you never want to take a bottle away from a member, but I would have really loved to take a bottle of tar pit. I mean, sherry, peat, all the bells and whistles. It's amazing. It's a great experience. But anyway, Matt Ryan says tar pit is great.
Yeah. Josh says the tar pit brought a beautiful tear to my eye last night. Oh, it sounds nice. Like something emotional with the experience you had there. Yeah, I know. But it's the reality of every bottle we open. You know, we try to limit how many we open because every bottle we open is one that our members can't open. So we try to be mindful of that. You want to move on? So, I mean, you want to sum this up? Nice. Tom, you want to sum this up in some way? Just final thoughts on this whiskey. Obviously, first pour of the bottle. What do you think?
Yeah. First pour of the bottle. I mean, certainly some really beautiful floral, tropical elements on the nose with that freshness you mentioned on the palate, and your baked apple pie is like spot on. On the palate, the texture is really building up now that we've added some water to it. Really mouth coating, silky, great structure from the barrel, and really nice spice with some more kind of buttery pastries and orchard fruits up front. It's a nice number 26 for sure.
Yeah. I'm big on it. I just think it's like the perfect April draft. You know, April, sort of early spring. It's still a little cold outside. It's like a perfect pairing for me.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a good one. I mean, when we build these outturns, we try to keep, you know, the seasonality in mind. You can only go so far with that. There are some exceptions, but you know, we certainly want to highlight ones that are good for that seasonal drinking. And I think this is certainly one of them, for sure. Nice. Shall we?
Yeah. All right, good. So where to next?
You want to talk about this one? Let's go to the Central Space Side for a little spicy and sweet endeavor.
So this was a little surprise to see in the selection. We should probably show it before we open it. 24.142 toffee.
Hey-o.
Toffee Tango and rhubarb rumba. Rumba. It's not the bad.
Rumba. Yep.
Rumba. This is not an endorsement, but I do love a good rumba at home. But 18 years old, this one, from a American Oak ex-bourbon barrel, first fill bourbon barrel. So typically, of course, the casks you'd see from Distillery 24 are generally Oloroso sherry. And we've seen sort of some of those, you know, most recently, but we also get to experience that spirit in more of a sort of a, I don't want to say less influential, but you know, American Oak tends to allow the spirit to drive forward a bit more than Sherry Oak. And so 18 years old, 57.4%. Pretty excited about this one.
Ooh. All right. Now who was talking about a tier before? Now they're coming.
Well, we've gone up quite a bit in the age, obviously, at 18 years.
Oh, that's a beautiful nose, Ben.
Wow. So right away, oh man, it's remarkably different. Just in the depth, like as I was pouring it, you could just sort of smell depth just taking hold. It's very different from the first one in that sense that the first one looked very just in your face, fresh. Even though it was delicate, it's also intense in a way, if that makes sense. You guys know what I'm talking about. This is just immediately intoxicating. Oh, God damn.
I mean, you just have layers of the nose.
Yeah, it's
I'm getting some really kind of bright orchard fruit up top. Underneath it, more of like earthy, earthy vegetable.
There's like a bit of musk to it. I get like a bit of, like a lemon seed oil and musk. It's a very, very exotic aroma, different from anything I've had in a long time. I typically not. I don't usually swirl the whiskey, but I'm swirling just to get.
I always swirl. It's a habit. It's a habit from my wine days, and I can't kick it. So
you're a wine guy, yeah.
I mean, still, you know, you're getting a little more. Maybe you're getting a little more oxygen in there by swirling. Doesn't help as much with a 60% alcohol spirit as it does with a 12%, but still. I mean, I'm getting some like a lot of earthy, like almost kind of like that petrichor that you sometimes use with peated whiskeys. I'm getting a bit of that there.
Yeah, the spirit is
kind of damp earth, and
Tom, you are the key identifier of petrichor. If there is petrichor in a whiskey, Tom will be the
I will find. I love that stuff. I mean,
so you want to explain what it is, just for everybody in case you don't know it?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, our colleagues in the UK will explain it as you know, like soil or a grass meadow, like right after it's rained. So there's a bit of dampness in the air. There's a bit of earthiness in the air, but it's still very fresh. I think that's a pretty good explanation of it. I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but that's at least what I understand.
Shout out to Fermented Grains 420, who said, I like the scrolling description, but it would be better if the flavor profile was included. Well, there you are, good sir. Or ma'am, this is, I've added now, so this is the spicy and sweet flavor profile.
So I'm getting all the, you were talking about like lemon oil, some kind of citrus oils earlier.
It's not,
it's really coming through for me now.
When I'm describing, like when I say it's an exotic profile, I'm thinking of, you know, it's like oftentimes when you taste whiskey, you think of places in the world, places you've been to, memories. I once went to, to Thailand. Like there's in northern Thailand, there's just so many essential oils everywhere, and like it reminds me a lot of sort of storefronts in Thailand. Like they have a lot of kaffir lime, but I'm getting a bit more of like sort of the lemon seed oil. And
nice. Yeah.
In a way, it's like, you know, the whiskey that you see from Distillery 24 is typically matured in sherry casks, but the spirit itself, if you kind of get beneath the oak influence, the spirit is perfectly encapsulated here. Like I would say this is, so from a whiskey, if that makes sense. So from a whiskey standpoint, this is very different from what you'd find on a shelf from this distillery. But if you go to the distillery, you taste the spirit itself, it really shines through. And over 18 years, I think it's matured beautifully. I haven't even tasted the whiskey, by the way. I'm just
let's taste it.
Yeah.
Let's get in there. I'm excited. Oh.
Really intense. Oh. This is
that is a mouthful.
Yeah, really intense delivery. Like what is
you want to talk about texture?
Yeah.
That's amazing. There's more spice. There's certainly more of that tannic structure than the first, but not drying, still very, very silky, but so much more intensity throughout from the entry all the way to the finish. Wow. That's some pretty good stuff, man.
Yeah. The spice really comes forward too. I've just actually, I've tasted it.
Very spicy.
But like it's like an allspice type of type of note.
Yeah, certainly more cabinet type than pepper, for sure.
Yeah, it's texture is very silky. I agree. Like I love the depth of flavors. I just love the combination of of this spice, which you would typically, how do I say it this way? The spices I think we're talking about remind me of like a fall or wintertime whiskey, but the profile is very light and fruit forward. So you have this unique, I think it's a really unique spirit because you have, in one hand, it's very bright and fruity and very elegant in that sense. But then you have sort of some of these heavier baking spices, like an like an allspice or like a Chinese 5-spice a little bit, that you typically find in a whiskey that would be more like, I don't know, like a wine cask or a sherry cask. But then you have that here. And so it's sort of like this dyad that is really, really unique. And I'm totally nerding out about this right now. And that's the whole point, I guess, of the stream. But like it's really different. And I think that's what I appreciate about it. It's just how different.
Well, I'm just like over here saying, oh, this is good shit, man. So please nerd on. Because my fairly monolithic approach is, a little different. So now there's all kinds of honeyed fruits, dried fruits. I mean, pick your poison. There's a lot of stuff in there. And then you start getting to these other kind of roasty, toasty kind of attributes to it. I mean, it's just an ex-bourbon barrel, right? A first fill ex-bourbon barrel. It's a nice barrel. Because I feel like you're getting spices and stuff that might come from another kind of cask.
Yeah, I mean, you know what I mean? It's like there are some notes that, and it begs the question of, where does flavor come from? Where do different flavors come from? I think oftentimes we attribute flavors to certain origins, and sometimes maybe I just question, are we always right about that? I think, I'm always surprised, and through the society tasting, how many of our whiskeys we've tasted over the last several years, so many. I'm always surprised by some. There's always an exception, and so this has me thinking, man, some of those spices that I've always thought would come from, like a fortified wine cask, are actually very present in this bourbon wood matured Speyside whiskey. So
yeah,
perhaps from the spirit.
And yeah, certainly the intensity of the make has to have something to do with that, because I think we all know how rich and voluptuous this is, even before it's aged. So
yeah, man, with a few drops of water, I just substantially better. And again, these are.
I kind of don't want to add water to this one, but I will.
Do it. It is. Yeah. It's like symphonic. The aroma just leaps out of the glass. I think it's, again, these are just the first neck pours. Oof. And I think with each minute they're having time to breathe. But the depth, I think the water really adds a lot of depth.
I'm getting a lot of kind of sauteed pear in butter. Some really nice honeyed characteristics to it. After water, I'm not getting so much of that petrichor I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
It's quite a bit sweeter on the nose, and oh yeah, just really, really full.
Yeah, it's really. I think it probably becomes less exotic in a way with water. I think some of the notes are a bit more familiar, more classical Scotch, Speyside Scotch notes. But
well, for what you may think it lacks in exoticism on the nose, the palate now is really intricate. I mean, there are a lot of little nuances to pull out here.
Yeah. So just an odd observation that I have is when I added water, I thought that I've never experienced this, or maybe I'll have to go back and pour another dram later. But I felt the texture became more, not more viscous, but it just became more silkier with water.
Absolutely.
Which typically, you know, when you add water, you would think it becomes a bit thinner, but there's actually more. It feels like there's more depth, and maybe that's just the flavors are coming forward now a bit more, so they're masking the. I don't know. Maybe I'm confusing the two.
There's probably a chemistry class behind that we can take and and figure that out. But I would agree that the viscosity of it certainly increased. It's still like kind of, you know, even though I've swallowed it, you know, 20 seconds ago, it's still kind of lingering on my palate, and there's a lot to pull out there. The spice is coming back, you know, several seconds later, and I'm still just getting waves of flavor without taking another sip. I mean, that's always a good sign.
I finished that one, so
that's really nice.
I think that says it all right there.
I mean, yeah, and it's nice. I mean, yes, it's 18 years from a monumental Speyside distillery, and you know the price tag reflects that. But it's also nice to see one of these in a price point that's probably a bit more accessible to a lot of our members. So, yeah, this is really exciting. And then there will be some vattings coming down the road as well from Distillery 24. Like we've seen with Distillery number 7 in the past, where you have, you know, 12 years at a pretty affordable price point for most of our members. So it's nice to be on the road to a bit more accessibility for everyone. So because this is brilliant whiskey, really is.
Yeah, it's just so.
Yeah.
I'm into it. I'm into it more than I thought I would be.
Well, I figured it would be good. You know, it should be good for that price point, but it's exceptional. I mean, that's exceptional. That's an exceptional Speyside dram. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we have more.
Whiskey Throttle.
But wait.
Whiskey Throttle.
Wait, there's more.
Yeah, Whiskey Throttle commenting on the depth. Come on, it dilutes, allows you to pick up less stronger notes and nuances. Yes. My observation was that uniquely adding water seems to also enhance the texture of the spirit, which is something I have not really experienced. Typically, you know, I think a trade-off in adding water, you know, when you add water, of course, it will release naturally more flavors and aromas. But usually there's a trade-off where it will actually dampen texture a little bit. But I just thought, I was like, wow, this is still really silky, really silky and rich, if not more so. But again, I perhaps I was confused, you know, confusing the two with the sort of the enhancement of the flavor with the texture. Anyway, we can talk about that later, but just wanted to clarify that point.
Yeah. And also, I mean, you know, there's probably a functionality of the amount of essential oils from the barrel, probably more essential oils from the barrel in a first fill than a second fill or a refill. So perhaps there's an interaction there with the water, as well. Yeah. Yep. You're right.
And I love you too, Whiskey Throttle. So let's move on to the next one, because we're going to just keep rolling through this. And there's something I think we haven't seen, a cask from a distillery that we haven't seen in quite some time, if I recall. I mean, I can't remember the last time, but it's been a while. Tom, you want to do the honors?
Of what? I'm sorry. I was looking at the chat. I'm not very good at this YouTube thing. All right.
I'm just ready to go on to the next one. So we have two more. We have four.
Oh, yeah, sure.
We'll show the rest of the Outturn. It's dropping now in 25 minutes time. So we'll taste 4 today with you, you know, at this moment, and then share the rest very shortly. So let's go to number 3.
Yeah, so number 3, this is Society Cask number 125.77. Distillery 125 is a rarity. I mean, this is one of the rarest birds out there. And, you know, we do not see many of these. They are known for pioneering additional maturation. To this day, their experimentation is on a level that few others can really manage. So just the breadth of choice you have from them in special bottlings is tremendous. With our single casks, it's always a very, very fun treat. And this particular one has an interesting additional maturation. So this is cask 125.77. It's called Graceful Elegance. It spent 13 years in an ex-bourbon barrel, and its final 2 years was, what have you written there? In an ex?
No, it's in PX
barrique.
And right. Sure, which is interesting because
Pedro Jimenez, but it's not any Pedro Jimenez barrique. It's a Pedro Jimenez barrique from a particular bodega in Jerez, and this bodega is 9th generation, family owned. It's the oldest bodega that has not essentially sold to larger companies, and they deal exclusively in the Pedro Jimenez varietal, farmed from about 50 acres, 20 hectares of their own organic land. So it's PX, but it's kind of like PX with a bit more behind it, I think, at least story-wise. Let's see how it expresses itself in the glass. But very exciting for this. So yeah, I'm gonna pour.
Well, it's interesting too. It's initially from a first filled bourbon barrel, from a second filled bourbon barrel, and then to the PX barrique. Barrique is you guys, it's a type of cask that is typically used for aging wine, but PX sherry is most commonly, as far as I understand, aged in a larger cask called a puncheon. So we've transferred this spirit from the bourbon wood into a barrique, which is smaller than the typical PX. And so generally with the smaller the cask, you're getting a greater concentration or greater influence of the cask into the spirit itself. So that's an interesting move. I haven't seen a lot of PX. I just saw your reaction there. I had the same one.
Jesus.
I haven't seen a lot of PX barriques.
Stop talking and stick your nose in this glass, please. Oh my Lord. Yeah, this is good. This is good. I'm a huge fan of sherry, like most of you are out there. And I guess if you're clamoring for it, you might get a very light whisper of struck match. But it's light. What's really coming through is all that beautiful sherry character for top notes, and then you get into that very elegant style of the make from this distillery. Oh, we picked some pretty good ones today, huh? Not bad.
I was just told to stop talking, put my nose in it, and you know what? That was actually good. That was good advice because that was good advice, and it allowed me to actually spend some time because. Oh man. It's funny. The PX, the sherry, sort of the sticky sweet fruits, it's sort of heavy in prune, more baking spice. It's definitely there, but I'm sort of getting beneath that. It's not overpowering, and I appreciate it. Like I love if you're doing a second maturation in a different cask. I love it to retain. I like just the initial spirit to retain some of its original character. And this is well balanced. I don't think it's overpowered by that second cask. It just sort of adds an extra layer.
Well, that's really what Ewan is going for. Ewan Campbell, our spirits manager in Scotland, who is in the warehouse several times a week, monitoring and managing and curating these casks for us. The mission is to add flavor, not to mask anything. So, it's typically with a lighter touch that you're employing an additional maturation. And, I think he does a phenomenal job with that,
This is one that you just know that as more time goes by and as the days go by, it's going to get so much. It's going to get. I can't even look. I'm literally speechless. That's what we've come to. It's going to get.
Oh man!
But I agree with you regarding you, and I do think you. And if you're watching this, shout out. I don't think you are, but I think you can tell just based on what he's putting out, his skill.
He's at the pub having a beer at this point in the day.
Probably so.
Yeah.
But I think the experience.
And well, he should be.
I think it's hard. It requires a skill to understand when to pull the cask at the right time. I think if it were to go, months further, it'd probably be out of balance. Some might like the greater sherry influence, but I kind of like this perfect balance. Everything seems in sync.
It's a really deft touch. And wow. But you're right. This will absolutely benefit from another 30 minutes in the glass, another week in the bottle, for sure. Because you can feel it's a little tightly wound. There's definitely more to be revealed. You're getting so much on the nose, on the palate right now, but there's more beneath it for sure.
Yeah.
And I think probably adding a little water to this will benefit us, at least in this moment. But this is beautiful. It's an absolutely beautiful nose.
Yeah, PX sherry very different from Oloroso, and it's funny because we're sitting here and keeping the theme of the seasons. And I don't know. I live in the Midwest, and we have 4 seasons to 4 different extremes. It seems like. So I'm big on seasonality when it comes to enjoying whiskey. When you have a big collection at home, I love being able to sort of reserve certain styles for different seasons. That if you're not like that, by all means, do it your own way. But I kind of like that. And with sherry, typically I reserve sherry for sort of the colder months. But with this PX sherry, it's sort of very bright, very fruity. It's fresher in a way. It's not too syrupy. A lot of times PX sherry, a whiskey matured PX, can sort of evoke like heavy molasses or prune juice. It doesn't have that. I think it's extracted enough of the influence to be, very apparent that it is in fact PX sherry, but it's still, I think, perfect for the spring season, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah, and it is if we were tasting blind, I'm a terrible blind taster, but let's say I was really good at it, and if I were to taste this blind, I might actually say, because Oloroso can go dry or sweet, right? So you can make those sherries in either way, whereas Pedro Jimenez is always sweet. But I might guess this to be a sweeter Oloroso than a PX maturation, personally, because it has that elegance, it has that lightness to the sherry influence that is so lovely.
It would be.
I just saw something.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I would say it would be interesting to taste this one blind if we didn't know what it was. I'm knowing that it's PX obviously changes your experience with a whiskey, but as you're describing that, I'm thinking like I'm nosing it. I'm like, oh, you know what? I think I probably would
just
do the same thing.
Just 2 minutes in the glass here, and it's a different whiskey. Yeah. It's a totally different whiskey. Some of the alcohol is blowing off, and depth. I mean, that's really wild.
Comment from Brent Gibson, who says Chicago has 2 seasons, winter and construction. I would totally agree.
I wanted to say something about that, if I may. Can I interject? So while I've lived in New York City for way too long, I am from the cow country of central New York, and up there, the 4 seasons were almost winter, still winter, and road construction. So that really resonates with me. Nice. So Brent, thank you. A little trip down amnesia lane. Sorry, Ben, go ahead.
No. Listen, guys, just a heads up. We're 15 minutes away from the official release of this Outturn. We do have one more to taste. So we'll get moving with our 4th today. And then I'll go ahead and pop up the list, which you'll actually, if you subscribe to our emails, you'll be receiving an email with the whole breakdown. If not, they'll be in our shop online as well. But I would suggest subscribing to our emails, just so you'll be the first to hear about it.
125.77, folks. That is exceptional stuff. And now this one that we're about to taste might be the sleeper. I'm not sure. We're about to find out. But every so often, the society will, our tasting panel, rather, in Edinburgh, will assign these flavor profiles. And you're like, that's interesting. I remember my first experience with that was was a cask from distillery number 3. Now, I had only been working for the society for like 3 months. So, when you see Isla, you think, well, it's peated, right? But they said, actually, this is not the case. And it was labeled as deep, rich, and dried fruits. And that cask, 3.270, to this day might still be my very favorite society cask. Surf and turf in a camel's saddlebag, if you can find it. But this one reminded me of that today. So this is a distillery number 122. There can be a couple of different distillery names associated with this, because it is, and I'm going to rip off my friend Matt from Hawaii, it is the Swiss Army knife from a distillery I guess we can't talk about here, but it's 135. So under that roof, you have all kinds of different stills, making about 13 different styles of whiskey, and this is one of them. But it's young and sprightly. Young and sprightly is typically reserved for fairly high ABV, Speyside, Highland type ex-bourbon malts that are typically unpeated. This one was actually made from heavily peated malt within the distillery. So it says young and sprightly. It's pink, and you may think it doesn't have the intensity that a peated whiskey would carry, but Ben, how's it going? Does it have some intensity?
It's I got called out for my reaction. But it's a peated whiskey, and it's snuck through. We have 3 peated. We have 12 flavor profiles for members to choose whiskeys based on what they enjoy. 3 of them are peated, and it just this is the first peated whiskey a spirit that's actually peated. The malt has been peated, smoked with peat. That's slipped through those 3, and it's a young and sprightly that's peated. And it's just so funny because we were talking about construction. Can we have a whiskey that tastes like construction? Now, I've not tasted this one yet, but it's like
certainly smells like some elements of construction.
There's a lot, but there's also menthol smoke. There's like a menthol eucalyptus thing going on.
Yes,
almost like a locomotive steam too. I would throw in there too. It's very airy, very eucalyptus. I think if you could put those together, think of like a steam
railway track to a log cabin. I like that title. That's a good one.
That's a good name.
That's real good. 6 years old, so it's a youngster.
Yeah,
full of power.
2.2%. George Kaplan already committing this will be my first young and sprightly.
Oh, welcome, George. It's a brave new world in the young and sprightly land.
What are we doing here? We haven't even tasted it yet. We can just sit here.
No, we haven't. Well, the nose does perceive much more than the palate, right? So if you're going to spend some time somewhere, it should be on the nose.
And
sorry. Go ahead.
No, please.
Well, I was, I'm picking up on your menthol, your eucalyptus. I'm also getting like smoked sausages, like off the grill. Like there's definitely some burnt, like well-seasoned meat in there somewhere. I'm not sure exactly what it is.
Okay. But, by the way, I've just actually picked up I picked up the bottle of port, but now I'm looking at it for the first time. The invitation, I've never seen this before. It says eucalyptus twice. The first word is actually eucalyptus, and then and then it ends with eucalyptus forest. So
okay, so
clearly I'm not losing my mind, but I just
pardon the redundancy, but eucalyptus is there. Oh, that is.
I think
brilliant.
We should clarify.
I mean, that's good stuff, man.
I think we should clarify because this is a peated whiskey, but we just came off of 3 unpeated. The last 2 being particularly sort of luxurious profiles. So compared to those, it's a smoky whiskey, but it's very light when you compare it on the spectrum of what peated Scotch whiskey is and can be.
Especially at 62. Yeah, at 62%. It's maybe it's because we're 4 whiskeys deep now, but it certainly doesn't have a lot of. It doesn't have too much intensity, burn, any of that from the high ABV.
But wow,
it's a great example of Highland peat.
Yeah,
where you have this kind of combination of like wood embers You have a little touch of that medicinal, not too crazy, not like an Islay, but it's there for sure. A little bit of like burning rubber or something like that, like when you're screeching your tires.
Yeah.
But there's all this lovely fruit behind it. There's tons of fruit in this whiskey. So, I mean, that's fun. That's fun.
I like the combination of railway track to a log cabin. It's interesting. I think I mentioned something about like a locomotive steam, and we're moving so quick on that I'm not really attributing.
But also think about the tire. Think about the railroad tires, right? The pieces of lumber that have tar on them and they're laid down. I mean, that's all over this as well. Yeah. So, yeah,
in my free time,
that's a really cool dram.
In my free time, I just like to get down on my, hands and knees and lick tar off of trains. But so I should know.
Well, when you're a kid growing up in central New York, there are only so many things you can do. So, yeah, I did that probably.
I didn't do that because we just have winter.
Maybe twice.
We just have winter and construction here in Chicago, so I
don't have time. You have to stay indoors; you'll freeze to death.
Yeah, this is an enigma. This is the type of whiskey that you would not find at a whiskey shop, generally bottled by distillery. It's not too out there, but it's just so unusual. You know what I mean? Like it's just not. It's so far apart from what I think we know Scotch whiskey to be. I mean, feel free to disagree, but I just think it's such a unique thing. It's like representing a snapshot in time, a peated spirit that's very lightly Highland peat, as you said. That's obviously such a low level of peat that it's escaped even any of our three peated flavor profiles. But yeah,
I mean, it is classified as a heavily peated whiskey from this distillery. So, but heavily peated from, let's say, distillery number 93 is only about 20 ppms.
Yeah.
Heavily peated from distillery 29 is 60 ppms. So there's some bandwidth there. There's some leeway. But yeah, that's what's interesting. If the tasting panel thinks that the attributes of the youthfulness and the maybe the alcohol intensity trump the peated character, then they're going to go that way. And I think that's part of the artistic license that they're afforded.
Yeah.
This could have easily been, I would say, I think peated or lightly peated, you could have classified it as either, for sure. But I love the fact that it's young and sprightly, because again, as members, we're already on a level. Like we're on a level of whiskey appreciation that a lot of folks haven't gotten to yet. They will, I think, eventually. But even within that realm of us as a society, it's good to kind of shake the tree once in a while and kind of shake things up. And this is one of those casks where, if you're just scanning and you're looking for the green and you're looking for that burnt sienna, which is deep, rich, and dried fruit, then you're going to skip over this, but you're skipping over a tremendous glass of whiskey. So that it's a good little lesson, I think.
Yeah.
And that's why I thought it would be fun to show this today, and I'm glad it delivered, because man, that delivers. It delivers. It's got a lot going on in there.
I think, Tom, that you bring up a really good point about just sort of where you're at, everybody that's at personally with your own whiskey experience, and learning to appreciate things at different times in sort of your own experience. I think it's important to get nailed on all the bases. I guess I'm going to kind of sort of piggyback off what you were saying. I'm going to say, if you've sort of familiarized yourself with the more classical styles of sherry matured whiskey, Oloroso and PX sherry, bourbon matured whiskey, peated whiskeys of the various regions, dabbled into some Highland peated whiskeys or some mainland peated whiskeys, I think you'll eventually come to a point where okay, now I'm looking for something different, and this is a natural fit. I would also say, maybe you're not there yet. Maybe you're still exploring the classical styles. This is something that if you want to jump off right away and just say, okay, I just know this is going to be different, this is unique, I think it's easy to appreciate. And it's really shocking that at 6 years old, at 62.2%, how approachable it is. Like, it's an easy one to appreciate. And, perhaps pick up a bottle, taste it now, and then in a year's time, come back to it as you're exploring more and more whiskeys, and you'll get a different experience.
Well, it's funny. I think that a large kind of theme that we have today is give this whiskey more time. I mean, if this last one, this 122.34 gets better, that's a win. But like right now, in this moment of us tasting it straight out of the bottle, this is awesome. This is awesome. I mean, for a peat lover who enjoys like a slightly lighter dram to maybe warm up with before they get into like, Octomore 8 point whatever, this is fun. This is really fun. And it's an interesting conversation piece for folks who are all about peat, because it's definitely giving you a different angle. But it gives you a really enjoyable dram, for sure.
All right, guys, we're about just over 2 minutes away from the official release of the Outturn. I want to just share it real quick, the remaining casks that are going to be coming up. And let's see here. So now, apologies for the PDF. Tom, as you can tell, Tom and I are trying to keep this as real as possible by opening.
Wow, Ben, you really treated everybody to a visual spectacle here.
Imagine sort of big brands investing thousands of dollars into presentations that have things moving. We are here all about the whiskey and investing everything into the whiskey itself. Here's a breakdown I'm about to drop in a couple minutes time. Obviously, we've had a few. It looks like there are 2 here from Islay, peated and heavily peated, as we're talking about peat just now. I want to just kind of call out this one that's in here called Intrigued. You Should Be. I just love that name. I love everything about that one. You Should Be. Reminds me a bit of Yoda, who says you will be.
Intrigued you will be.
I'm not afraid. You will be. You will be.
Oh,
but yeah, here's a nice little selection here, which I think is pretty unique. Obviously, we've had a couple today that were from distilleries we do not see often. Really, I think, we try to bottle a lot of whiskey from lesser known distilleries, but we had a couple really big ones. Due to popularity, you just don't see many examples of in single cask form, which I'm excited about. 2 Islas, as I mentioned, which are pretty exciting. A slow sipper.
And also, if I may, if I can just jump in real quick, dude. 12.43. This is a second fill sherry butt. 28 years all in this second fill sherry butt. It's got a sporty price tag, but I mean, you're not going to find a whiskey like that, under $1,500 these days. So that's one for sure. And there are only a few bottles of this 35.267, a Wooden Sweet Factory, from one of my sentimental favorites. And that's another very well-aged whiskey. But anyway, go back to your Islas, your beloved Islas.
Anyway, screenshot this. It's officially 1:00 Eastern time, so you should see these casks popping up right now. Thank you all for watching, for tuning in to this tasting. Hope you enjoyed watching us go through.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody.
We will be available now to sort of take orders if you'd like, or ask any questions. Drop a comment in below once we post the replay. And good luck with everything. Hope you enjoyed the lineup. Tom, I certainly did. And so thank you for
I did too, man.
Tom, you are responsible for putting this lineup together with every Outturn. If you like it, tell Tom. If you don't like it, please tell Tom.
If you don't like it, please tell Tom. I'll take it all, guys. I'll take it all.
All right,
thank you so much, and we'll see you again soon.
Sláinte.